I built Nexus Software Systems 26 years ago, back in 1998. I did not physically lay every single brick in our 40-story corporate headquarters in downtown Seattle, but I personally reviewed every architectural blueprint, approved the steel schematics, and picked the dark slate gray carpet in the main lobby specifically because it hides accidental coffee stains. I am 54 years old, and my name is Grant Vance. My official executive portrait hangs inside the central boardroom, depicting a confident founder who built a small cloud architecture company into an enterprise software powerhouse valued at $140 million. But on this humid Tuesday morning, I was not wearing my tailored navy suits, my silk tie, or my gold watch. Instead, I wore a faded gray polyester jumpsuit that smelled faintly of industrial lemon disinfectant and other people's sweat. My palms were rough, my hair was unstyled, and I pushed a squeaky yellow mop bucket down the marble corridor of floor 12. I was undercover. When you spend over 2 decades building an enterprise on principles of unyielding integrity, mutual respect, and honest labor, and then retire to the board of directors, only to hear persistent whispers that your executive floors have morphed into a toxic frat house, you do not just issue a corporate policy memo. You step into the work boots of the lowest paid employees. You become invisible. You watch how people behave when they assume you have zero power to impact their careers. I was scrubbing the glass windows near elevator bank B when the polished doors slid open. 3 young men stepped into the lobby. They radiated the loud, unearned arrogance typical of ambitious junior corporate sharks who believed the business world existed solely for their benefit. Leading the group was a senior product analyst named Bryce Thorne. Bryce had a soft, round face, slick dark hair, and expensive brown Italian leather shoes. He held a large, hot mocha latte in his right hand while wildly gesturing to 2 intimidated junior associates who hung on his every word as if he were delivering sacred truth. "You have to dominate every room you step into," Bryce boomed loudly, adjusting his designer tie. "In modern corporate culture, if you are not the loudest voice at the table, you are just furniture. Meridian principles are dead. In this building, you either eat or you get eaten alive." To emphasize his grandiose point, Bryce executed a sudden theatrical spin near the floor-to-ceiling glass wall. Physics, however, demonstrated zero respect for his career ambitions. The plastic lid popped clean off his coffee cup, sending a geyser of hot, sugary mocha splashing across the polished glass, the chrome handrail, and the pristine floor. A few scalding drops landed directly on the toe of my dark work boot. An uncomfortable silence descended upon the hallway. In my former life as chief executive officer, 3 administrative assistants would have rushed forward with linen napkins, and Bryce would have turned pale with immediate apologies. But today, I was merely a facility temp with a crooked paper name tag that read Grant Bryce. Glanced down at the brown puddle on the marble floor. He did not look at my face. He looked right through me, checking his gold watch with a heavy, annoyed sigh as if the spilled coffee had personally insulted his busy schedule. "Clean this mess up, janitor," Bryce snapped. His voice contained no anger. It was completely flat and dismissive, like a man barking orders at a broken vending machine. "Try to get it done before the vice president arrives for the morning strategy review. It looks unbefitting of our image." My fingers tightened around the worn wooden handle of my mop. A sharp flash of pure anger flared in my chest. I vividly remembered firing a vice president of sales 15 years ago for lying about business expense reports, and I wanted to unleash that same commanding voice right now to peel the arrogance off his ego. But I forced my posture to slump. If I broke character right now, I would learn nothing about how deep the internal rot truly went. "Yes, sir," I mumbled quietly, keeping my head lowered toward the floor. Bryce did not even bother to acknowledge my verbal response. He stepped carelessly over the puddle and strolled toward the executive suites, with his 2 followers trailing behind him. I knelt down on the hard floor, dipping my cleaning rag into lukewarm, soapy water. As I wiped the brown liquid off the marble, I made a silent vow to myself. Bryce might enjoy his clean floor today, but I was about to mop the floor with his corporate career. The service elevator carried me back down into the building's sub-basement. I was no longer merely observing minor workplace rudeness. I was actively gathering evidence of systemic decay. and my mop bucket was getting heavier by the hour. My first full week wearing the gray jumpsuit proved to be a masterclass in human psychology. An ordinary facilities jumpsuit functions remarkably well as an invisibility cloak in corporate America. Directors, department managers, and ambitious executives would stand 3 feet away from me, discussing sensitive department reorganizations, confidential layoffs, and internal political rivalries, while I vigorously scrubbed whiteboards or emptied overflowing trash bins. I was treated as a completely non-existent entity, somewhere between the hallway water cooler and the potted plants. I was assigned primarily to floor 12, which served as Bryce Thorne's main operational area. Every morning, I emptied recycling bins filled with empty energy drink cans, protein wrappers, and discarded financial reports. Every afternoon, I wiped down the glass walls of the primary conference rooms, giving me an unhindered front row seat to the corporate theater taking place inside. Bryce held the title of Senior Product Manager, but he operated with a calculated sociopathic efficiency. On Wednesday morning, near the main floor 12 kitchenette, I observed Nora Gable, a quiet accountant who managed vendor ledgers, struggling to lift a heavy 40-pound box of printer paper onto a storage shelf. Nora was soft-spoken, humble, and incredibly hard-working, the exact type of employee who quietly completes 80% of a department workload, while receiving zero recognition from management. Bryce walked past the kitchenette doorway. Nora looked up, flushed and visibly struggling with the weight of the box. "Excuse me, Bryce," she requested politely. "Could you please give me a quick hand lifting this box onto the top shelf?" Bryce glanced down at his watch without slowing his pace. "I have a hard stop in 3 minutes, Nora," he replied coldly. "Call facilities. That is what the company pays them to handle." He breezed past her without another thought. Yet less than 10 minutes later, when Vice President Marshall Prescott walked into the kitchenette, Bryce materialized out of thin air like a predator sensing opportunity. Marshall was an imposing senior executive, with silver hair, a heavy gold watch, and a booming laugh that echoed down the halls. "Mr. Prescott!" Bryce exclaimed loudly, flashing a brilliant artificial smile. "I was just looking for you, sir. I drafted a comprehensive proposal to optimize our software supply chain by trimming our bottom 10% of vendors. I calculate we can save $250,000 this quarter alone." Marshall paused while pouring his espresso. "Is that right, Bryce? Send the proposal over to my office." "Already in your inbox, sir," Bryce answered smoothly, handing Marshall a wooden stir stick with exaggerated deference. I stood 10 feet away, mopping a completely clean patch of linoleum floor. The jarring contrast between how Bryce ignored Nora in her time of need and how he groveled before Marshall was truly nauseating. That evening, inside my small temporary apartment near the train station, I sat at a simple wooden table with a black notebook. I titled the first page "The Rot." Underneath, I recorded exact names, timestamps, and behavioral observations. Elderly 1, Bryce Thorne. Persistent disrespect toward junior staff, aggressive sycophantic behavior toward Vice President Marshall Prescott, refusal to assist colleagues struggling with heavy materials. Entry 2. Marketing directors making derogatory remarks about administrative assistant salaries within full earshot of the reception desk. Entry 3. Human Resources representative dismissing employee overtime theft complaints due to personal friendships with department heads. My back ached from hours of unaccustomed manual labor, and my hands were dry and cracked from industrial soap. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the psychic pain of watching the software company I founded being hollowed out by selfish opportunists. On Thursday afternoon, I witnessed a far more dangerous situation unfold. I was positioned under the kitchenette sink, repairing a leaking drainage pipe, when Bryce entered the room accompanied by Owen Reed, a brilliant junior developer. Owen had single-handedly engineered core cloud algorithms for our main enterprise platform, but he possessed little corporate assertiveness. "Look here, Owen," Bryce said, his tone dropping into a patronizing purr. "We are launching the platform migration update this Friday. Marshall expects major results. The migration code is simply not stable yet." Owen pleaded desperately, his voice shaking with anxiety. If we force this update live on Friday without 2 weeks of additional testing, we risk a 5% data corruption rate across 45,000 enterprise customer accounts. We cannot afford that risk. Bryce poured himself a coffee. You are thinking like a low-level coder, Owen. You need to think like an executive. We launch on Friday. If bugs appear, we patch them next week. It is called agile development. That is not agile development. Owen argued with rare courage. That is reckless sabotage. If enterprise customer data is lost, it will trigger catastrophic legal liabilities under federal data standards. I cannot authorize this code deployment. A heavy silence descended upon the room. You do not have to sign off, Owen, Bryce said in a chillingly calm voice. I already told Marshall the code is completely ready. If you contradict me in the executive stand-up meeting, you will make our entire department look incompetent. And I happen to know Human Resources is reviewing engineering headcount next week. It would be a terrible shame if your name ended up on the severance list. My hand froze on my wrench beneath the sink. This was not merely workplace arrogance. This was illegal, coercion, extortion, and deliberate corporate sabotage designed to protect a manager's unearned reputation. Crawling out from the dark space beneath the sink after Bryce and Owen departed, a cold, unyielding fury settled into my core. Bryce was actively risking enterprise client data, blackmailing a talented junior engineer, and violating foundational labor principles. Under federal employment standards, specifically the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act under Title 29 of the United States Code Section 2101, retaliatory threats of termination without statutory notice carry severe legal penalties, not to mention a devastating breach of fiduciary duty owed to the corporation and its shareholders. I washed my hands at the sink and pulled out a prepaid mobile phone that I used for undercover communication. I dialed a confidential direct line that bypassed the main company operator. The line rang twice before a sharp professional voice answered. Roxanne Miller speaking. Roxanne had served as our head of internal auditing for over 18 years. She was fiercely objective, uncompromisingly honest, and trusted only verified data. Roxanne, it is Grant Vance, I said, keeping my voice low. Do not ask about my physical location right now. I need you to immediately flag all code deployment requests originating from the Floor 12 product team. Grant? Roxanne exclaimed in genuine astonishment. Where on earth have you been? The board believed you were resting at your estate in Europe. I am conducting an extensive audit from the ground level up, I explained concisely. Senior Manager Bryce Thorne is forcing a deployment of unstable migration code scheduled for this Friday at noon. It threatens to corrupt 45,000 customer accounts. I need you to secretly isolate that deployment into a secure sandbox environment. Let Bryce believe the code is executing live, but sandbox all system calls so no actual customer database is touched. Consider it done, Roxanne answered without a second of hesitation. Is there anything else you require? Run full forensic financial audits on Bryce Thorne and Vice President Marshall Prescott, I added firmly. Inspect expense accounts, vendor contracts, and proprietary software claims under federal copyright law, under Title 17 United States Code, Section 106. I terminated the call. Bryce wanted to play high-stakes corporate poker with my company reputation. I was about to overturn the entire table. By the 4th week of my undercover assignment, my dossier of evidence was nearly complete. The toxic culture was not confined to Bryce, it had infected senior leadership. On Tuesday morning, I was assigned to clean the main executive conference room, known internally as the aquarium, during a strategic director meeting. Vice President Marshall Prescott stood at the head of the mahogany table, using a laser pointer to highlight a downward trending graph projected onto the glass wall. Our quarterly operating margins are compressing, Marshall announced loudly to the assembled directors. The primary root cause is operational overhead. We maintain far too much internal support staff and excessive facility maintenance expenses. We must trim the corporate fat. I sprayed disinfectant cleaner onto the glass partition, my arm moving in rhythmic hypnotic strokes. Trim the fat, I thought bitterly. This statement came from an executive whose personal expense accounts revealed $24,000 spent on luxury steakhouses and private golf outings over the preceding 6 months, we should transition all facilities, IT support, and administrative personnel to third-party contract agencies, Marshall continued casually. We can easily slash 15% of our support budget by contracting with the lowest outside bidder. Support staff are merely line-item expenses and background noise. I paused with my cleaning sponge in hand, standing 3 feet behind his leather chair. I looked directly at the back of his head. He was casually discussing destroying the livelihoods of dedicated employees like Harold in maintenance, who had helped me wire our very first server racks 26 years ago. To Marshall, human beings were merely numbers on a spreadsheet to be erased for an annual performance bonus. Watch where you are spraying, old man. Marshall barked suddenly, without bothering to turn around, as my mop bucket clicked softly against his chair leg. You are disrupting an executive meeting. I bowed my head respectfully. Yes, sir. My apologies, sir. I pushed the heavy bucket out into the hallway, my heart pounding with cold determination. Background noise, I repeated silently. You are about to discover just how deafening the background noise can become when it fights back. Later that afternoon, I used my master janitorial keycard to enter the central server vault. Dust and heat are the primary enemies of optical server blades, so facility staff possessed full physical access to the room. Sitting down at a primary administrative console, I logged in using my Founder Master credentials. Within 2 hours of deep system analysis, I uncovered the full extent of the scheme that Bryce and Marshall had constructed. They were preparing to illicitly transfer proprietary cloud database architecture to an outside shell company registered under Marshall Brother, representing an indisputable violation of federal patent law under Title 35 United States Code, Section 271, alongside severe breach of fiduciary duty and dissipation of corporate assets. They plan to attribute the inevitable system crash to Owen Reed, force out senior management, and repurchase the proprietary software at a fraction of its market value. I downloaded full audit logs, encrypted system commits, forged digital signatures, and high-definition security video files onto an encrypted external drive. The evidence was absolute and overwhelming. This was no longer merely a case of workplace rudeness. It was a criminal enterprise operating inside the building I had built. The trap was fully loaded and primed. All that remained was to pull the trigger. By Friday morning, the emotional atmosphere on floor 12 was thick with dread. The engineering team worked in silent despair, believing their unstable code was about to launch at noon and destroy 45,000 enterprise accounts. Bryce Thorne, conversely, spent the morning strutting through the hallways like a conqueror, anticipating an immediate promotion. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was inside the main floor 12 kitchenette, replacing heavy black trash liners. The air smelled of stale microwave meals and burnt coffee. Bryce walked into the room accompanied by 2 junior associates named Brody and Lance. They were laughing boisterously, radiating the obnoxious arrogance of men who believed they were completely invincible. I am telling you guys, Bryce bragged loudly, leaning back against the marble counter. Marshall already assured me I will receive the director promotion the moment this deployment clears today. The old board members are obsolete dinosaurs who belong in a museum. They have no clue how to run a modern enterprise. Brody chuckled nervously. What about Owen warnings regarding severe data corruption? Owen is a faint-hearted coward who lacks executive vision, Bryce scoffed dismissively. True leaders take bold risks. Followers clean up the mess afterward. Bryce then noticed me bent over the large waste receptacle. A slow, malicious grin spread across his face. He held a half-eaten powdered donut filled with bright red strawberry jelly. He looked at Brody, then turned toward me. Watch this, Bryce whispered, making sure his voice carried across the room. He stepped directly over to where I was working. Whoops, he announced in fake surprise. Instead of dropping the donut into the open trash receptacle, he deliberately dropped it directly onto the top of my head. The white powdered sugar exploded across my gray hair, while sticky red strawberry jelly smeared down the back of my neck and onto the collar of my jumpsuit. Brody and Lance burst into loud snickers, covering their mouths with their hands. I froze completely. The physical surprise was jarring, but the sheer indignity was profound. For 26 years, I had built this corporation on principles of honor, hard work, and mutual dignity, only to have an arrogant senior analyst drop trash on my head for cheap office amusement. "Oh, my bad, janitor," Bryce sneered, his voice dripping with condescending mockery. It just slipped right out of my hand. Physics is tough, isn't it? I stood up very slowly. I turned around to face him directly. The sticky red jelly dripped slowly down my neck, but I made no move to wipe it away. I locked my eyes onto Bryce's watery blue eyes with a cold, unyielding intensity that I had not summoned since negotiating multi-million-dollar corporate acquisitions. "You dropped that on purpose," I stated. My voice was low, deep, and unnervingly steady. Bryce's artificial smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He took an aggressive step into my personal space, radiating hostility and expensive cologne. "Excuse me?" Bryce whispered menacingly. "I suggest you remember your exact place in this building, old man. Workplace accidents happen, just like it would be a tragic accident if I reported your rude behavior to the contracting agency. Facilities tamps are replaced in 5 minutes. You need this job to pay your rent, don't you, Grant?" He sneered down at my plastic paper name tag with absolute disdain. "Clean up the floor," he ordered harshly, pointing at the scattered powdered sugar on the tile floor. "And do not ever speak to me again unless you are spoken to first. You are hired here to clean up after us, not to open your mouth." He turned on his heel and walked out of the kitchenette, his 2 companions following behind while casting amused glances back over their shoulders. I stood alone in the break room, my hands trembling not from fear or embarrassment, but from a terrifyingly pure rage. I walked over to the stainless steel utility sink, turned on the cold water, and washed the sticky red jelly out of my hair using coarse hand soap. I scrubbed my neck until the skin was raw. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, seeing the gray jumpsuit and wet hair, I finalized my plan. "You want to test physics, Bryce?" I thought to myself, wiping my face with a paper towel. "Let us see how fast you accelerate when the floor drops out beneath your feet." I did not return to my temporary apartment that evening. Instead, I ascended to the executive penthouse suite on the top floor, which had remained locked and undisturbed throughout my undercover assignment. I removed the gray jumpsuit and spent the night reviewing the comprehensive master audit compiled by Roxanne Miller. We possessed documented evidence of contract forgery under state penal statutes, deliberate sabotage of core digital infrastructure, breach of fiduciary duty, violations of federal copyright law under Title 17 United States Code Section 106, and systemic workplace harassment. At midnight sharp, an automated corporate-wide broadcast email was dispatched from the office of the chairman to all 3,000 employees across all international facilities subject. Mandatory all-hands address and strategic review. Attendance. Mandatory for all executive, managerial, engineering, and support personnel. Location: main corporate auditorium, Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock sharp. Key speaker: Founder and Chairman Grant Vance. The stage was set. The corporate rot was about to be excised with surgical precision. On Wednesday morning, at 9:45, the main corporate auditorium was packed to capacity with 700 employees, while another 2,000 logged into the secure global live stream. The atmosphere inside the hall was electric with curiosity and intense speculation. Speculation had raged for days regarding why our legendary founder, Grant Vance, was making his first public appearance in over 3 years. Behind the stage curtain, I stood before a full-length mirror. The faded gray jumpsuit was gone. I wore a tailored navy blue Italian wool suit, polished dark dress shoes, and a crisp white shirt. My silver hair was neatly groomed, and my gold watch gleamed under the warm vanity lights. Roxanne Miller walked up beside me, holding a digital tablet displaying real-time sandbox logs. Bryce executed the deployment at noon on Friday, she reported with a sharp, satisfied smile. The sandbox network recorded 45,000 simulated data corruption errors within 10 seconds. He then dispatched an automated incident log, attempting to frame Owen Reed for the system failure. "And Vice President Marshall Prescott?" I asked quietly. Marshall formally signed off on the illicit software transfer to his brother Shell Corporation. At 8 o'clock this morning, Roxanne confirmed. Both individuals walked straight into the legal trap. Every single transaction is fully recorded, time-stamped, and verified by legal counsel. "Excellent," I said. At 10 o'clock sharp, the auditorium lights dimmed. The massive high-definition screens on stage displayed a documentary celebrating 26 years of technical innovation at Nexus Software Systems. As the video concluded, the announcer voice echoed across the quiet hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and chairman of Nexus Software Systems, Grant Vance." I stepped out from behind the velvet curtain into the bright center spotlight. The sharp clicking sound of my leather dress shoes against the wooden stage echoed clearly through the silent auditorium. As I reached the podium, polite applause swept across the audience. But I did not offer a smile or a casual wave. I stood tall, placing my hands firmly on the edges of the podium, projecting an aura of unshakable authority. I looked directly into the front row center seats. Sitting in prime view were Vice President Marshall Prescott and Senior Product Manager Bryce Thorne. Bryce wore an expensive new suit, chatting casually with Marshall, entirely unaware of the storm about to hit him. Then Bryce looked up at the stage. He looked directly into my face. I watched the exact second his brain connected the dots. His smile vanished instantly. He blinked rapidly, staring at my face, my hands, my posture, and my eyes. The color drained from his face with terrifying speed, leaving him pale and gasping for air like a landed fish. He recognized the gray-haired temp janitor he had pushed aside, ordered around, and covered in strawberry jelly. "Good morning," I began, my deep voice booming effortlessly through the sound system. "For the past 26 years, most of you have known me as a name on a corporate building, or a signature on your stock certificates." I paused, allowing the heavy silence to stretch across the room until it was almost unbearable. "But over the past 4 weeks," I continued, locking my gaze onto Bryce, "some of you have known me much more intimately. You knew me as Grant the facility cleaner. I wore a gray polyester jumpsuit. I pushed a squeaky yellow mop bucket, and I scrubbed your restrooms on floor 12. A dramatic collective gasp echoed across 700 people. Shocked murmurs swept through every row in the hall. "Why did I do this?" I asked, stepping out from behind the podium to the front edge of the stage. "Because when you build an enterprise on integrity and human dignity, you do not allow toxic arrogance to destroy its foundation. I spent a month invisible in your corridors, and I witnessed how power behaves when it assumes no one of importance is watching." I pointed a firm finger directly at the front row. "I watched senior managers humiliate dedicated accountants," I declared, staring at Bryce. "I watched executives plan mass layoffs of support staff while expensing tens of thousands of dollars on luxury steakhouses. And I personally experienced an associate product manager deliberately dropping a jelly donut onto a janitor head while threatening his employment." The audience erupted into shocked gasps and loud expressions of disgust. Bryce shrank back into his plush seat, looking as though he wished the earth would open up and swallow him whole. "Furthermore," I continued, my voice hardening into solid steel, "I uncovered active corporate sabotage, a deliberate push of corrupted code intended to destroy client data, followed by an illegal attempt to frame a junior engineer, alongside federal patent infringement under Title 35, Section 271, and severe breach of fiduciary duty." I raised my hand, and the giant screens behind me immediately displayed clear high-definition security footage of the break room incident. 700 employees watched Bryce deliberately drop the donut onto my head, followed by crisp audio of his condescending threats. "This behavior is not leadership," I announced sternly. "It is a toxic liability." I looked directly at Marshall Prescott and Bryce Thorne. "Your employment with Nexus Software Systems is terminated immediately for cause," I declared. "All stock options are revoked, and complete evidence of your financial fraud, contract forgery, and patent theft has been handed over to federal law enforcement authorities." 2 tall corporate security officers stepped down the center aisle, positioning themselves beside the front row seats. "Escort Mr. Thorne and Mr. Prescott off the premises immediately," I commanded. "They are forbidden from returning to their offices. Their personal items will be mailed to them in black trash bags." The audience watched in breathless silence as security grabbed Bryce and Marshall by their arms, lifting them out of their seats. As Bryce was dragged up the aisle, pale and trembling, he cast one final desperate look back toward the stage. I raised the microphone one last time. Oh, and Bryce, I called out across the silent auditorium. You missed a spot on floor 12. The heavy auditorium doors slammed shut behind them, sparking a roaring burst of applause from the engineering, administrative, and facilities staff at the back of the hall. I turned back to face the remaining audience. Today marks a complete renewal for Nexus Software Systems, I stated warmly. Effective immediately, we are raising base pay for all facilities, administrative, and support staff by 20%. We are promoting Owen Reed to lead cloud architect, and we are enforcing an absolute zero-tolerance policy for workplace arrogance. The entire auditorium rose in a thunderous standing ovation. An hour later, I sat in my top-floor executive office overlooking the Seattle skyline. Roxanne Miller walked in carrying a glass of 20-year-old single malt scotch. "A complete success, Grant," she said with a warm smile. I took the glass and looked out across the city. The toxic rot had been severed, dignity had been restored, and the foundation was strong once more. To the quiet contributors, I toasted softly, raising my glass toward the window. And to the messes we clean up,